welcome to Three Count Commentaries. Today we're going to be talking about WWE rivals Foley versus Triple H. And you know what? I like this. I thought it was really good. And to me, Mick Foley is without a doubt the most selfless wrestler probably ever, especially main event wrestler. This guy has given so much to so many, taken so many crazy bumps, destroyed himself, usually for the benefit of other people. But, you know, kind of in his later years, we're starting to see that Foley is really appreciated for what he did. So they first set up the two characters. To Triple H, they showed an early character promo for him. And I don't think I've ever seen that before. Maybe it played on Superstars or something like that, but I don't recognize it. He was sitting in the chair, leaned back, and Shawn Michaels kind of explained that he's supposed to be like a Northeast American, sort of the snob stereotype of that era. Even though, you know, he was born, I think, in New Hampshire, and the character is supposed to be from Connecticut. So you also had Kane, who called it a little bit of cartoonish, but it was just a character to get him in the door. And that Triple H, of course, tells the truth again. You can watch anybody wrestle. You got to have a personality. You got to have a character. I wish he would pay more attention to that. Anyway, then we, juxtapose that to Mankind, who was, the tortured soul, and a guy who had no limits in his dedication or to what he would do to himself. Sam Roberts is there to recognize Cactus Jack, and that everybody was very interested in how are they going to repackage Cactus Jack, because so many people knew him as Cactus Jack, especially because he wrestled in WCW as Cactus Jack. So they skipped over a lot of that stuff, and they skipped over the early parts of Mankind, the tortured soul Mankind, and went straight into the JR promo, where the sit down with promo with JR. And this was very important for me because of what Kevin Nash said. And he's talking about, hey, what really affected him was Foley's high school picture. And they showed the picture again. And he says that he literally could be anyone. Like, it allowed you to live vicariously, or project yourself onto Foley, because he looks like a normal person. He was skinny, kind of nondescript. There was nothing about him that stood out. But when you see the juxtaposition between him in high school and the guy sitting in that chair, Nash was like, how did we get here? And it was like, yes, that is a visual story that you can tell. How did we get from this, perfectly well-adjusted guy to this malformed heap of flesh that we call, Mankind? So Foley tells a story about him being 100% honest during this sit-down interview. And from there, he didn't really want to have a formal babyface turn. But that over time, of course, his character just started to turn babyface. Now, they kind of skipped over an important part here, and that is that this sit-down interview ends with Mankind attacking an innocent person. So it was meant to show that the character had like violent mood swings. But what you get out of the promo is that Foley has a very deep desire to be loved and to be appreciated. And part of why he looks the way that he does, why he does things that he does, is because he doesn't feel loved or appreciated, and that people don't really understand him. My favorite part of the sit-down interview has always been when Foley kind of goes after JR about, the he likes pain stuff. And he would say, like, what part of it do you think I enjoy? And that was always like my favorite part of the promo. But that's not something that they were interested in pushing in this Rivals episode. So Heyman started talking about how it was an intimate feeling promo, and it was able to strike a chord with people, and they were now very interested in this. And we see that the first match is the King of the Ring final, so it's kind of like not really a storyline as much as it's a happenstance that Triple H has to wrestle Mankind. But it makes sense here because, as Shawn Michaels explains, the King of the Ring is assigned to give you credibility going forward that you could be a top level star perhaps one day. And Triple H needed that. And Foley, he had already had the feud with Undertaker at this point. And as Mankind kind of explains later, this is Beauty and the Beast. You've got the guy in Mick Foley who doesn't look like a prototypical WWE wrestler, and he is fighting the guy who does look like the stereotypical WWE wrestler. And you see that the typical WWE wrestler has to cheat, has to cut corners, and there's something to be said about that symbolically. Because for a long time, that's kind of what wrestlers have said, that, the guys who Vince usually liked are pumped up on things like steroids, or they cut so many corners, they don't know how to work, they're not good wrestlers, and all this kind of stuff. They don't have any passion. And you see that kind of comes out in this situation here too. So I thought that was very interesting to look at it symbolically. I forgot they even had a match in your house, but they talked a little bit about that. And then he talked about the cage match and the poetry of Foley jumping off the top of the cage to score an elbow drop on Triple H after he was inspired to get into wrestling by Superfly Jimmy Snuka jumping off the top of the cage. I thought that was very cool. That's always been very cool. It's always been very, like I said, poetic to me. So Dude Love is there. And Kevin Nash is, once again, he adds so much to these episodes because he's a wrestler, of course. And he pays attention. Because he says, like, hey, Foley's a mid-card guy without these layers to his character. And after the elbow drop off the top rope, he kind of starts to transform a little bit into Dude Love. And Dude Love makes people feel good. It's a Vince McMahon line that Foley kind of tosses in here. So that's good. So Dude Love and Triple H don't really have too much to do with one another. So they kind of go all the way to the Monday Night Raw episode, which was my favorite match between these two for a long time. I really like this match, mainly because of the bait and switch. It's supposed to be Dude Love versus Triple H, no disqualification, or a street fight or something like that in Madison Square Garden. They do the wonderful split screen thing where, Dude Love is talking to Mankind, and they introduce Cactus Jack, and they really put over how Triple H sold that. And that's how guys should always sell somebody returning or somebody coming in. And this is a situation where you take a character that nobody's ever seen before, in terms of nobody in the WWE has ever seen them, because Cactus Jack has never been there before. But you build the mythology of Cactus Jack. And if you are somebody who, let's say, is too young to recognize who Cactus Jack is, the crowd reaction, Triple H's reaction is definitely going to tell you something. It's going to give you a good idea. And then if you're familiar with the other two faces of Foley, and you do this sit-down interview, and Dude Love is like, hey, no disqualification, street fights, not really my thing. And then, okay, well, so Mankind is going to wrestle the match. And then you're like, wait, Mankind is talking about it, saying that, hey, as bad as I want to do terrible things, there's somebody who wants to do things that are worse. And you're like, wait a minute. And then you get introduced to Cactus Jack. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's hell yeah. Oh, hell yeah. So that was great. I always loved the introduction of Cactus Jack. It's one of my favorite debuts of a character. Even though Foley was already on the roster, it was very cool how they managed to do the Cactus Jack reveal. So Foley, of course, wins the title a little bit later, and Triple H is sort of inspired by how Foley can bridge and juggle all of these characters. And he starts to begin his own transformation. So that's the Sunday Night Heat. This is probably the most significant thing to ever occur on Sunday Night Heat, where the game is actually born. Cody called it a piece of art. We got to see a lot of Cody's Triple H mark come out in this joint. And and Triple H starts talking about, his why. Why is your character doing what they do? Why do they think the way that they think? And as he's going through his version of the sit down interview with JR, which of course is very cool because you have to parallel with Foley's sit down interview with JR, is that he said his why had to have some believability to it. And he didn't pre-plan it, but he came down, he just had passion. There were things that he wanted to say that he felt like he needed to say, and then he went and said them. And so that was cool, and again, this might be the most significant thing to ever happen on Sunday Night Heat, is to get over the Triple H character and to move him away from the D-Generation X Triple H more towards the game, and this sort of ruthless supervillain who has no end to his ambitions and will destroy anybody or anything. This Machiavellian character that Triple H always played. It was a great introduction to it. That strap match with The Rock was very cool too. I think they had that match. Was that the match that happened right after this promo, I think? But that was my favorite Rock and Triple H match. So they talked about Triple H winning the title from Mick Foley, and Triple H talked about it being validation, because the first time is real. Triple H wanted to be, the most hated guy ever. That was his goal. And so they went about trying to do that, about trying to make him the most hated guy ever. So Foley says that, Triple H needs something to solidify him in this role. Like, he got the title shot by torturing Jim Ross. And so he needs something to make him a viable main eventer. And this is where we get Royal Rumble 2000, where both guys sort of agreed that this is the match that proved that they needed to belong. And Foley said, look, we just had a series of matches, but at this point of our careers, we're two different characters. Not only am I, wrestling this match as Cactus Jack, but it's no longer Beauty and the Beast anymore. It is, the game Triple H. It was a different character than the Connecticut Blue Blood Triple H. And the ultra-violent Cactus Jack, which is different from the more toned-down version of Cactus Jack you got in 1997. Because this one is on pay-per-view. And JBL called it a rite of passage, that you kind of go through these super violent matches to add credibility to the characters. And Foley says that Triple H and he decided to use thumbtacks even though Vince told him not to do it anyway. And that Vince wasn't even mad that they did it, because it was one of those times where it was better to ask for forgiveness, than ask for permission. So that was very interesting. I know that they were looking for, expecting Vince to give him some bullshit for it. And he actually kind of was like, wow, these guys are, Triple H has a piece of wood sticking out of his leg. I don't know if I can, punish these guys too much for that. Plus, I think the era probably allowed them to do whatever they want. Plus, they were on pay-per-view too. So, let the guys go ball to the wall a little bit. So Foley says that, at this point, he was 32 years old. He had been doing this for a long time, setting himself on fire, jumping off stuff, barbed wire, and he wanted to be finished. So they hype up the No Way Out title versus career match. And Triple H says, what more can you do as a bad guy than to take away their most beloved good guy? And Foley was the guy who had the reputation. He had done the Hell in a Cell match previously, and he couldn't be beat, except for, being thrown off the top of the cage. And that was a challenge for his character, because you're talking about, how do you beat this guy who only lost the Undertaker because he almost died? So now you have to create a believable way of beating Mick Foley and adding that legend to your character and adding that toughness to your character. I like that we got, Becky Lynch here, because she talked about how much she cried when he lost, because she was so emotionally invested in what Mick Foley was doing, which is very cool. And Foley says, okay, there's a very creative way. There's an art to presenting toys. And he talked about the flaming 2x4, how they were on top of the cell and the 2x4 is on fire and he raises it in the air. It's all very cool. It do the backdrop through the cage thing, which I was never really a big fan of. To me, it felt like it was one of those times, just like Triple H and Jericho fighting on top of the cage, or anybody fighting on top of the cage now. It kind of feels like, yeah, we kind of have to do this. So for Cody, this Hell in a Cell match is when Triple H became his favorite wrestler. Triple H had finally kind of broken through for him, and he became a real Triple H mark. And Foley talks about at the end, Triple H is gone, had left the ring to him, and left him the opportunity to do the old blood, sweat, and tears to ride off into the sunset. And they showed, the picture of Foley being super sad, covered in blood, tears in his eyes that he lost. A great story, because they do follow all of the matches that they had. Unfortunately, we know that wasn't the end. These documentaries are often made for people who are not fans. And that's the only negative thing about this, is because we know that Foley wrestled the next month. He wrestled at WrestleMania. He wrestled at WrestleMania 2000. If you're a fan, you know that. He had other matches sporadically. Like, I guess you could say technically he was retired. And he was coming in for short spurts after that. He would come in for a match here or a match there, never for an actual run. But we know he wrestled the very next month. And that was the nature of the Attitude Era. Nothing meant anything. A guy was fired, but he was back on TV 20 minutes later. A guy was retired, but he never actually left. That was just we just kind of burned through stipulations. It was to add stakes to our matches. But did we really follow through on the stakes? Not really. That was sort of the nature of the Attitude Era. And that's sort of the nature of wrestling, period. A guy is a loser leaves town match, or a loser has to leave wrestling and he just goes to a different territory, but for me, you look at, this was an episode of Rivals that was similar to what I used to do on this channel called, The Art of Storytelling or something like that, where you go through each match and you talk about, the storyline build up for each match. And I thought that this was the closest to that. And I thought it was very good. And the Rivals episodes are not the best because sometimes it just covers things that are already covered in the biography. And there are parts of that to this. There's certain parts to this episode that was covered in the D-Generation X biography, and that was covered in the Mick Foley episode of biography. But then it add new elements because you're talking about a single feud. And I think that this is, I think for a long time people have seen Triple H as chiefly a Rock villain, kind of like he's the Rock's Lex Luthor, as the Rock is seen as mostly a Stone Cold Steve Austin villain. But I loved that, he is sort of the guy for Foley, that him and Foley had this long history too. And that's kind of the benefits that you get of having guys across multiple eras, having guys on the roster for a long time, as they get to have these rivalries across time, like the Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart thing, where they had the tag team thing as the Rockers and the Hart Foundation. Then they got it early, Intercontinental Championship. Then they got it later as the World Championship. And you got to see how, they kept going against each other over time and learning about one another. And the matches got better. The chemistry got better. But the heat got more realistic too. And you saw the same thing with Steve Austin and The Rock. So I really didn't think too much about the Foley Triple H string of matches, but I certainly care more about them now. And I thought this was very well done. But let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace.